are going well, turn for going well. Maybe you lost a job and you get a job, or maybe you had a good job, or maybe your son or your daughter got married, or you had a family, was married too. By the way, that's a great grandson was named. We're not why he said this, and you guys are doing this now. I'm not lost for words when I'm talking to someone. What to say with my granddaughter. Truth is, she lost it. It's not powerful. The other side is easy to do and be when we start when you have problems in your life. That, that, that,
It's biblical perspective. Just the idea of it from a biblical perspective. So what I'm going to be talking about is this idea. And I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of duration, of source, and connection. I'm looking at the notes because I don't want to misquote anything for you. Let's talk about happiness and joy together and just put them together so we get a better understanding of what happiness is and what joy is. And you're probably saying, Tim, why are you talking about this? Aren't they the same thing? No. That's it. That's where the confusion comes in. They're not the same thing. And if we're going to understand how to be thankful in spite of what life throws at us, we have to understand the difference between happiness and joy. So, getting back. Happiness, duration. It's often short-term and fleeting. What does that mean? Begins with a T, ends with a Y. Temporary. Yeah. Temporary. Happiness is temporary. Why is happiness temporary? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about joy's duration. Longer lasting and more permanent. What that means to us is that they're not the same thing. Happiness and joy are two different things. And that's the first step toward us understanding how to be thankful when life throws curveballs. First step. Let's take the second step. Let's talk about the source of happiness versus the source of joy. The source of happiness is usually always external circumstances, events, or possessions. Haven't we talked about that just now? That most of the things that we talked about making us feel good and joyful and happy is events and something happening. But see, that's temporal. Those things are temporal. And even though we get happiness and joy in those short-term things, we can't have happiness all the time because other things are going to happen that's going to push that emotion out of the window. So happiness is usually short-term. Joy, on the other hand, it comes from an internal state of peace, purpose, and this is the important word, contentment. So we need to learn to be thankful in everything. We need to learn to be content in everything. Now notice I didn't say happy with everything. Because I already just said happy is what? Fleeting. Contentment is not fleeting. You can be content even when something bad is happening or has happened. And we're going to go through some Bible examples of that. So bear with me for that, but let's continue on. So that's the second step. Understanding that happiness is fleeting. Happiness is influenced by external circumstances, and joy is internal. And that's step 2 toward being able to be thankful in all circumstances. Let's go on. Connection. Dependent on life going right or according to expectations. That's happiness. If life and everything's happening the way we planned it to happen, and everything's going the way we want it to happen, what are we going to be? Happy. Yes. Joy, on the other hand, exists independently of external circumstances. So what that means is that you can be internally content even though life is really bad right now. Now that's hard for us to understand. That's hard for us to wrap our heads around because we are human. And we're thinking about it from a human's perspective. And a human's perspective is very influenced by, guess what? External circumstances. External circumstances can influence our thoughts, our reactions, what we say, how we say it, who we say it to, and who we don't say it to. Because sometimes we get back at somebody by not talking to them, by not saying anything to them, by not responding to them. But that's not the way we should be. Because if we let external influences influence how we feel about things in life, we're not going to react the way we should react. We're not going to be that candle on the hill that God wants us to be. We're not going to be that light in the world that shines through the darkness that God wants us to be. So how can we be thankful? How can we? We can't. Next thing we want to do is talk about a few quotes before we get those two examples I want to show to you. Some quotes. There's a whole lot of quotes. If you ever look up or Google, if you will, quotes about gratitude, you're going to get a whole slew of them. You're going to get one thing about 85 quotes about gratitude, another thing about 75 quotes of gratitude, another thing about these are the quotes of gratitude. There's a lot of quotes of gratitude. And a lot of them kind of center around happiness and how you feel about what's going on. But I'm going to give you some that we can think about. Melody Beattie says gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It helps you appreciate things, is what she's saying. It helps you appreciate things. Gratitude is the healthiest of all human emotions. You'll recognize his name, Zig Ziglar. He said that. Appreciation is a wonderful thing. It makes what is excellent in others belong to us as well. And what that means is that we can share our gratitude with others. And that can make their life better too. See? It's not happiness that brings us gratitude, it's gratitude that brings us happiness. And that's kind of focusing in a little bit more on what we're trying to say, right? Is that we can be thankful, we can have gratitude in spite of what's happening to us, because that gratitude and that thankfulness will kind of help push out those darknesses. But again, that's oriented toward what? External circumstances, right? And there's a lot more. There's a lot more that we could talk about with regard to. I'm going to give you two that you may not have ever heard of. You've heard of the name Willie Nelson, but he has two ideas of gratefulness and thankfulness. First one is, if you want to turn your life around, try thankfulness. And what he's saying with that is that when you feel thankful and you express thankful and your gratitude, that you're going to feel better. It's going to make it easier, and whatever's happening is going to make it easier. And another one he says is when you start counting your blessings, your whole world turns around. It does that. Haven't you thought about that sometimes? We have a song, Count Your Many Blessings, right? And when we count our blessings, it helps us to see what we have. So even if times are tough right now, it helps us to feel better about what's going on. So it's hard to understand how we can be thankful when bad things happen. I have another lesson. Someday I may be able to present it to you guys. I say it to my wife all the time, and whenever something's going on, and she says something, I said, there's a word for that. She goes, yeah, I know. It's life. Life is a four-letter word sometimes. And it is. And there's a lot of four-letter words that can fit into that word, but it's just hard. Life is really hard sometimes, and how we react to those things going on affects us. Let's see in the Bible how some people reacted. First one I want to go to is one that's well known, but we probably didn't think of it as being a thanks type of lesson. We probably didn't think about it being a thanks kind of lesson. Let's go to Daniel chapter 6. This is a well-known story. It's about Daniel getting thrown into the lion's den. But the part that leads up to him being thrown in the lion's den is actually a lesson on thankfulness. Believe it or not. And after you're done, we'll have a different perspective of this story. I'm going to read a few verses ahead of time, or before the actual part that talks about it, to give a lead into it. The first part of chapter 6 is when Daniel is placed as one of the governors over that area by the king, right? So Darius put him over it. And he not only is he's one of the top 3. And of the top 3, he is the favorite. And the other 120 governors didn't like that very much. And it gets us down to here is that it says, starting in verse 3, it says, "Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over all the realm." So they conspired together. In verses 4 and 6, or 4 and 5, you see that they're conspiring together. They know they want to get rid of Daniel, but the only way they're going to get rid of Daniel is going after his faith in his God. So, verse 4. "Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could not find an occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. They said to these men, 'We shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God.'" So, they hatched a plan. The plan was they were going to upset Daniel because they knew that Daniel was going to do and worship his God. So, verse 6. "Then the presidents and princes assembled together the king and said thus to him, 'King Darius, live forever.'" All. Put an underscore if you got a hard copy. If you got one that you can highlight it, highlight that word. "All of the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save one of thee, O king, he shall cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish this decree and shine in writing and be not changed according to the laws of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not," cannot be changed. So King Darius signs it. Why do you think I underlined that all? Because it wasn't all of them. Daniel didn't agree to it. But because they said all of it, the king thought that Daniel agreed to it too. He thought it was a good idea and he signed it into law. Now let's jump down to verse 10. "Now when Daniel knew that this writing was signed," what writing? The new law, right? "When Daniel knew that this writing was signed, he went to his house, he opened his windows to his chamber toward Jerusalem, he knelt down upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks." He gave thanks. Even though that he knew he was taking his life in his own hand, even though he knew they had conspired against him, even though he knew that there was a law written that he could not pray to his God, he prayed and he gave thanks before his God, and he did as he did aforetime. So it didn't change anything for him. He continued to do what he knew he needed to do. And these men assembled and found Daniel praying and praying, making supplication before the God. They came near and spake concerning the king's decree. "Hast thou not signed this decree?" And you know the rest of the story. He goes on and they go to the king and they tell the king, "Didn't you write this law? Didn't you say?" And he said, "I did." He said, "That Daniel." And the king's heart broke right then because Daniel was his favorite. And he tried and tried to be able to break the law, but he couldn't, because it was a law according to the Medes and Persians, which cannot be overturned, even by the king. So guess what happened to Daniel? You know the story? Gets thrown in the den of lions, right? But that's not the end of the story. The lions didn't bite him, didn't eat him, didn't touch him. That's not the end of the story. The king came. Let's go on down to verse 15. "Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. The king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God whom you service continually, he will deliver you. And the stone was, the stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, with the signet of his sublords, and the purpose was not he changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought him, or his sleep went from him. The king arose very early in the morning and ran in haste to the den of the lions. So it upset him so greatly he couldn't even eat. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't have music. He couldn't entertain himself. He was upset because he knew that Daniel was going to die. But he hoped he wouldn't. And when he came to the lion's den, he cried in a lamentable voice to Daniel. His king spake to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest able to deliver thee from the lions? This is the end of the story. Then said Daniel to the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel and hath shut the lion's mouth, that they may not hurt me. For as much as before innocency was found in me, also before thee, O king, I have done no hurt. Did Daniel have a hard heart because of what happened to him? No. He still showed that gratitude. He still showed that thankfulness, even though he was cast into the lion's den to be eaten alive. But that's not the end of the story either. Not completely. At the bottom of it, verse 24. This is the end of the story. And the king commanded that they brought those men who accused Daniel and cast them into the lion's den, them, their children, their wives, and the lions, and master of them, and break all their bones to pieces that ever came into the bottom of the den. That means the lions jumped up and grabbed them in midair when they were falling down. And God put that in there to show that the lions were lions. That he actually did save them. But the whole idea here is the thankfulness that Daniel had, even though bad circumstances were happening. And these were dire circumstances because his life was on the line. Make sense? Let's go to Philippians. Philippians chapter 4. This is a very well-known set of verses. This is verses that a lot of people say is their favorite chapter, favorite verses. All of this is falling into here because of what's taught. I'm going to pick a few of them out and we're going to talk about some of those. Verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. How can you do that? We'll go down to verse 6. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things, those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen to me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. That's not the end of it, but let me make a point here. Notice that he says, when things going wrong happen to you, what do? Focus on the good things. And that's the way to step toward being content even in dire circumstances. It doesn't make it any less. You're still having things bad happening to you. You're not acknowledging that the things are bad happening to you, but what you're doing is you're focusing on the good things that are happening, or the good things that have happened. It helps you to be a little bit more content. And by me saying that, that makes it sound like, oh, it's just a flippant, easy thing to do. No, it's not. It's a choice. You have to choose to focus on the good and not dwell on the bad. And it's hard to do that. I can tell you that for a fact. I've had 4 surgeries on my neck and face because of cancer. Here, 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 and here. Dire circumstances. Thankfully, they were not bad. They had to be excised. And it was hard during that time to be joyful. It was hard during that time to focus on the good things. I have a wonderful wife that helped me through that. But the whole idea here is that even when bad things are happening, you can make it through. Verse 10. But I rejoice in the Lord greatly now that the last care of me flourished again, wherein you have also were careful but lacked opportunity. In other words, they wanted to give him something. Not that I speak in respect of one, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be what? Most versions say content. Regardless of what happens, I've learned to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere in all things I am constructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And I know that's your favorite verse. Yes. What did he say here? Life won't get me down because God has taught me how to do this. Now, we may say, well, so what? We forget that those verses were written by Paul when he was in prison, waiting on his death. He didn't know when that death was going to come. He didn't really know if it was, but he assumed it was. But the whole idea is he was waiting in prison for his death, and yet he wrote these verses. But if you ever have any doubt about how much Paul suffered, let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. And we're going to go down to the bottom. This is when he's fighting against the false prophets. The prophets are saying that he's not an apostle and that they're a bit more of an apostle than he is. So he's giving defense for himself. Right? The false prophets and the false apostles apparently were saying to the people that they have suffered for God and they've done this and they've done that. And so he gives his own account. I speak concerning reproach as though I've been weak. Howbeit, whenever my opinion is bold, I speak foolishly, I am bold also. Are they Hebrews? Well, so am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they seeds of Abraham? So am I. Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. In labors more abundant, in stripes more above measure, in prisons more frequent, in death often. He was cast out 3 times, left for dead, is what he's referring to there. Of the Jews 5 times received I 40 stripes, save 1. Thrice was I beaten with rods. Once was I stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck. A night and a day I have been in the deep. In journeyings often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of mine own and countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among the false brethren, in weariness and painless fullness, in watchings often, in hunger and thirst, fastings often, in cold and nakedness. Besides those things, this to him is the height. Those that are, besides these things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of all the churches. What weighs on him most, even though all he's gone through, is still the care for the churches. Think about that. All those things that he's gone through. We can't say we went through any of those kinds of things. We've gone through some things, but he's had a hard life. And when he wrote those verses in Philippians, as I said earlier, he was in prison at that time, but yet he had the gall to say that he can be content in all things. Now, in the last 60 seconds, what does that say to us? Can we learn to be content in all things? Yes. Will life hurl curveballs at us? Yes. Will we strike out? Yes. But can we be content? Yes. So how do we do that? I'm not going to leave you high and dry. I've got 30 seconds. How do we do that? We focus on God. We focus on Jesus. We focus on the good and bright and wonderful things that have happened and how he's helped us through those things that have happened that are not good. We're not promised to have carefree lives. We're not promised to have uneventful lives. Some of us have more eventful lives than others, but we're not promised to have good and easy, carefree lives. What society says, life is not a rose garden. We're not promised a rose garden. But what we are promised is that God loves us. How do we know? He sent his Son. What did his son do? He died for us. Why did he die? To be that sacrifice for us. So that we can do what? See God in heaven. If we focus on the good, we can be content. Remember our very, very beginning? Happiness influenced by outside events. Contentment influenced by us inside and what we dwell on. If we let Satan help us to remember the bad things, guess what we're going to remember? The bad things. If we tell Satan no and we focus on the good things, sometimes we're going to have to really focus. But if we focus on the good things, we can help us through. Now, how does that have to do with thankfulness? As I've said all through this, I'm going to say it again here, and that's going to be it. Thankfulness can be done in spite of what life throws at you. I've shown you some examples. We've all got examples. So it's up to you. I can't be thankful for you. You can't be thankful for me. I can be thankful for you, but I can't be thankful for you. You can only be thankful for yourself. I can only be thankful for myself. And we've got to decide what do we want to be. Content and thankful, or begrudging in nothing. It's up to you. Thank you.